Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Factory Must Grow, episode 43. Joining us on the line today is Galdoc. Galdoc, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing well, and we have a special guest today in Eulenberg. Eulenberg, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Well, we're glad to have you. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about performance in Factorio in terms of both UPS and also kind of how Factorio is coded and some of kind of deep dive details into those things, which is stuff that's a little bit outside my normal purview. So I'm excited to learn a lot of things in this cast as well as you listeners are, I'm sure. But first, I want to thank the show's patrons. As always, this show is possible because of you, the listeners. If you'd like to support the podcast, head over to patreon.com/Krydax and you can subscribe there. And our mod spotlight for today is maybe the simplest one I've ever covered. This is called No Remote View Border. It's by Code Green. It was made about 8 months ago, which is not too long after the launch of Space Age. It only has 1.8 thousand downloads, and I think it should have way more. All it does is it removes the remote view border that they added in Space Age, so that way you get all of your screen pixels back. There is one little quirk, which is that it's in the border of the remote view border that you get the little back and forwards buttons as well as the search bar. However, you can still pull up the search bar with Control F and you can type into it. You just can't see what you're typing, which isn't too much of a big deal, I think, for most people that play. So yeah, that's it. That's the whole mod. It's really great.
In my view, whether you use this and you get bored or not, it is not remotely as popular as it should be. That was a sequence of dad jokes.
That was really rough. I was like, oh, that's a joke.
No, I went there the whole way. I didn't put the word no in there, so no.
Yeah. But all that to say, Code Green himself told me that it took longer to make the art for the thumbnail than to write the mod itself. It was apparently very simple. So it is a very short and sweet one, but I highly recommend it if you use remote view a lot. It's nice to have that screen real estate back. Personally, I don't find the border to do anything for me. It technically gives you a little bit of I don't know the right word, but it's like a
Real estate.
Sort of context.
yeah, it's a
Let you know which view you're in.
transition. Yeah, it's a transition line between like, oh, I know I'm in remote view and I'm entering into remote view because I'm in this little window. There's like a window that closes in around it, so it looks more like a screen view or whatever. But given you spend so much time in remote view, I just don't see it being worth it personally. It's
Yeah,
a big border. It's not like a skinny like 5-10 pixels. It's like 50 or more. It's a lot of pixels on the top,
I
especially.
personally like it. And this is just my view. I'm not, downplaying anyone's preferences, but I feel like for me, I'm because things change a little bit in how you actually interface with the world. Sometimes I'll get in the wrong mode of building stuff, and the
Right.
border does help me personally. But that's just because my brain is smooth.
I don't
And
think what's interesting is I had problems remembering if I was in remote view or not, the same when there was a border to when there wasn't a border, because my brain ignores the border anyway. Like your brain is really
Oh, that's fair.
good at ignoring things that don't matter. And
Sure.
once you stop seeing the border, you even though it's technically there, you don't see that it's there. So your brain still doesn't know if you're in remote view or not unless you like try to move your character or you open up the inventory and see that it's the remote view version rather than the normal version. Apart from that, I don't really have a way to know if I'm in remote view myself. So all that to say, it's nice.
Yeah. Personally, like when I use Blender, there's an add-on that puts a border around the 3D viewport when you're in recording keyframes mode, and I do like that. But I would not want to put that in a video game. It's very bright red. So
Right. Right.
there is something
Yeah.
to be said for that mindset. I just don't know. Anyways,
Yeah.
sorry.
I mean, personally, I use a lot of mods by Code Green, mainly the Blueprint Shotgun, but I have not tried the remote view border yet, so I will definitely do that. As well as like the crafting queue enhancement. I cannot play without crafting queue enhancements anymore. Once you did it, once you tried it, there's nothing better than queue to front.
Yes. It's so helpful. All right. Well, we're going to dive in with Eulenberg here. So let's get started by just asking you, Eulenberg, who are you? What do you do? What hobbies do you have? Tell us about yourself.
So Yeah, I'm Eulenberg, or my real name is Adrian. I'm 30 years old, student of computer science in Darmstadt in Germany. Um, so what do I do beside playing Factorio? Not much, but I play the drums and I like to read books.
What are we talking, like fiction, nonfiction?
I like to read manga.
Oh, nice. I love it. I love it. Are you also into anime or just manga?
Yeah, sure, but most of the time when I'm like really interested in an anime, I look up the manga and it tends to be just better because
Interesting.
there's what's important for me is the little bit of head cinema. And yeah, it's always like if you read Harry Potter and if you watch the movies, that's like a totally different experience.
Right.
And yeah,
Do
similar with
you
any written medium, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. My last question on this, because I've considered getting into manga myself a couple times, is do you read the manga digitally, like on a PC or a tablet, or do you actually get the physical books, paper books?
Usually I use like an iPad to read them, but for certain ones, mainly JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is one of my favorites. I buy books, but I always then try to get a hard cover because because they are for the shelf
Yeah,
mainly.
then they look
Then
nice on the shelf. Exactly. I'm that way with the
yes,
Stormlight books. I'm like, I need all the hard covers next to each other so they look nice. Yeah, yep.
Oh, I've only read the first two of that series. I still have the third one sitting on my nightstand.
Yeah, I'd
I
Someday.
mean,
only.
if you're reading digitally, they're the most readers. They have a very cool feature where they basically blend off all the panels that are not active.
Oh,
So you really have a very good immersion because basically it puts black bars on top and below.
Okay.
So you only see the panel that you're currently reading.
That's cool. I like that. Well, that's a cool sidebar. Back to Factorio, though. When and how did you get into Factorio?
Actually, I just got quite recently into Factorio. I mean, I know Factorio for a very long time, but only with the release of Space Age, I picked up and playing it regularly. I played a lot of other factory games before and enjoyed them, but it was like in a retrospective, more the people I played or the people that tried to bring me into Factorio were kind of like the issue. Um, because they were like experienced or they always wanted to rush to the next cool thing, bots and stuff, and I was like left behind, trying to figure out how to do a green circuit,
Right.
and and then like after some time I always dropped the interest. But with Space Age, it was they were all very like, let's play Space Age, and I was like, can't we play Satisfactory or something else? And then no, we have to play the Space Age expansion. And then they left, and they left me alone basically, and then I had all the time to play on my pace, and that's how I got into Factorio. Um,
So
and
your
I
first
never looked
playthrough
back.
was a group playthrough. Did you guys beat the game?
Yes. I mean, group playthrough is a little bit of a. I mean, they were there for the first 10 hours, and then they joined me when I conquered Kleber, when I conquered a kilo again to watch me fly to the solar system edge, basically.
So you kind of accelerated past and did the rest on your own?
Yeah, it took me quite a long time. I think like 600 hours or something.
Ooh.
But yeah, I enjoyed it a lot, and yeah, since then I've never looked back, and it's become my game that I play most of the time, um, nearly every day since.
Yeah, I think there's something to being able to take it at your own pace. And I think the experience that you just, cited there is pretty common amongst people when you try to jump into a game and you're playing with experts or veterans or seasoned players, as you will. So I'm glad that you got that opportunity, but I'm also glad that you branched out and did your own thing at your own pace. Because, I mean, certainly not knocking multiplayer, but boy, I really enjoy being able to dig my own teeth into it. And it sounds like you were in the same kind of boat.
Ensure that Factorio is such a like there are some things that are easy to learn, but some concepts that are not very easy to grasp for a beginner, especially. And if you're not given the time to uh, wrap your head around, then and I'm someone I have to understand it. I can't
Mm-hmm.
live not knowing how it works. For example, with rail signals, I had to basically spend 20 hours into brute forcing how they work, because I could not continue playing the game unless I know how train signals work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and because
what's
you have no
interesting.
expressiveness, you have no agency. You're just
Yes,
copying and pasting code versus actually understanding it, and that doesn't feel good. I mean, if you're trying to like, if the goal is to accomplish the thing, sure, but like with Factorio, the goal is to play the game and to
Right.
build your own understanding. So
Yeah, I
totally,
think this is an interesting topic because a lot of multiplayer is really popular just in general in gaming. And so a lot of people do get exposed to Factorio through a friend group of, gaming multiplayer people. But what's interesting is I think compared to most multiplayer games, it is a very different type of multiplayer game. Because, if you're comparing something like, there's obviously like the shooters like Halo and stuff, which is classic, Call of Duty, all that. But then there's even a lot more games these days that are really popular with friend groups, which is like the, stuff like Don't Starve Together, or, you're kind of like a cooperative team doing something and it's fun and sometimes a little silly. And, there's games like Phasmophobia and all that, which are, lots of laughs and jump scares and stuff. But then there's Factorio, where there's actually a big learning curve, and it's almost like a mathematics class where like you have to get it yourself. You could do homework in a group setting, but as a math teacher, I almost never assigned groups to do any sort of projects or anything outside of class. I would have them do group work inside class sometimes, but groups doing things outside of class, it's like that people aren't going to be striving for actually understanding what's going on because the whole goal is just to get something done. And if that's how a multiplayer group is approaching playing Factorio, you're going to run into problems. Because like you said, you want to understand it yourself. You wanted to understand rail signals. And if you don't get rail signals on your own and people are just like, oh, here's the rail blueprint, and you're just pasting it around, it almost increases your frustration every time you paste that thing that you don't understand on a molecular level. And
yes.
that's why I've never played Factorio multiplayer, really, is because I just don't like that.
It was always like when I was bringing up something, they were like, "Oh, here's a link to a blueprint," or I put a blueprint in the, in the share where you can share between the players. I just used that, and it was like, yeah, that fixes the problem temporarily, but what interests me is how does this work, or it never. Um, I was interested in like they wanted to achieve the next like big technology so they can get bots, for example. I wanted to figure out like how can I make the factory in the correct like ratios. So and in a multiplayer setting, it can be very hard that everyone's pace is on the same kind of level.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and then you got the one person who logs in when everyone else is out, and they just do a whole bunch of stuff, and everyone comes back. And what'd you do? Anyways,
Yeah, exactly.
never
and
happened
then
to me. What are
there's
you talking
this
about?
and then there's this one guy, you finally figured out the ratio for whatever, and then they log on and say, oh, there are not enough green circuits, and then they just put one gear assembler next to it, and then just everything overflows with gears, and yeah,
Yeah,
you're like,
I can't imagine. The only way I could do multiplayer, and it's a different vibe, but like for me, it would have to be if I'm playing with a group, the group only plays together and no one ever logs in when other people aren't there. So it's a group effort and we're all like in voice chat at the same time. Like that's the only way I could do it, because then you're building like all these links of like who's doing what, people are staying connected, people aren't doing these weird, but like a server, I don't know how people play on like multiplayer servers and stuff. Anyway, that's a total side tangent. Today we're going to talk a bit more about the performance aspect of Factorio, both in the game and out of the game. So Eulenberg, the first thing I think you wanted to talk about was actually Linux on this topic.
yes. I think when you talk about like PC performance on in Factorio, then you have to bring up one very, very big feature of the Linux version of Factorio that goes a lot under the hood. I mean, I'm quite sure that only a couple of people that don't play on Linux already know about it, and that's called non-blocking saves. So when the game autosaves, you will be interrupted, right? So there will be the green bar, and depending on how big your save file is, it takes a little bit longer. It's just a couple of seconds, but every 15 minutes there is this interruption. You get interrupted you want to place the assembler or something, and you get interrupted, and then you have to find back into the flow, right?
Or you
And
misclick. I've misclicked
or you
because of
misclick, right?
autosaves.
Yeah, you click one thing and then wherever your mouse pointer ends up, it's like,
Yeah.
oh,
And
I guess
there's
I put that over there now. Great.
And on the Linux and macOS version of Factorio, the autosave can be non-blocking. That means that basically Factorio clones itself, and then only the clone version does the autosave, and the version you're interacting with continues to run. So there's basically no no green bar or something. And I think this became the killer feature and the reason why I, for myself, totally ditched Windows as operating system. I had to use it for university and stuff before, but I decided to basically wipe my system of Windows and try to use Linux as daily driver. And it's been great so far. So, and especially that non-blocking saves feature, that due to how Windows works, it's not possible for Whoop to implement it that way into Windows. Otherwise, they would have done it. I'm very sure.
You know,
Um,
I love the fact that of all the things that have caused people to switch from Windows to Linux, that in your story it is a subtle feature of Factorio that was the straw that broke the camel's back. That
Yeah,
is
quality of life in a
outstanding.
video game is what got you
I
to
love it.
Linux.
This is
I
great.
mean, I
And
had to
I'm
use
about
it.
to take that jump myself, by the way, too. I have other reasons, and I'm leaving Windows soon.
I mean, I had to use it for like work and university before, because it's like in school you can say, oh, my laptop didn't boot, but on university no one cares if your laptop doesn't boot, right? And you have to do the assignment, and a lot of the courses are technically based on Linux. So if you're using a virtual machine for everything, it can become quite cumbersome. And so I installed it like on my university laptop anyways, and I already was familiar with the operating system itself. But when I saw that there's like this feature of Factorio, and the autosaves, they were something. I mean, at the end of my Space Age run, I had a very large save file. I think like 500 megabytes or something, and then it takes like 5 seconds or so to autosave, and then suddenly it becomes um, more obvious that every 15 minutes you get this interruption. And I tried
Mm-hmm.
it out, and yeah, never looked back. And also, if you are like looking to switch, I can kind of tell you that the general experience of the Linux desktop and also especially gaming on Linux has improved over the past 5 years by a big margin. So maybe you have heard about the Steam Deck from
Is
Valve,
exactly what I was.
and
Uh-huh.
Yes, I've heard of it.
Valve has put a lot of effort and I think money into bringing forward the Linux desktop in the past years. I think there's a very there's a quote from the creator of Linux. He said 12 or 15 years ago, there's a small company called Valve. You may or may not know it, but they will save the Linux desktop. And he said that, like I said, 15 years ago. And I think it's more true than ever. And from my experience, I mean, there are out of 1,000 games, 1, 2, 3 that you outright cannot play on Linux because they have some kind of anti-cheat that's very
Right.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
on that's implemented in a way that's not possible on Linux. Mainly the Riot games, you just cannot. But from my Steam library, I have yet to experience a game or find a game that does not work on Linux with not about a little bit of tinkering. Like,
Interesting. Yeah, that's really cool to know because I've been in the tech world probably more than the average American, at least, probably less than the average Factorio player. But I've been in the tech world my whole life, and Linux has always been something that has been a little bit of, it's scary. It's a big thing. It's a little bit above my like pay grade in terms of software stuff. It feels complex. I know there's a million guides out there that would walk me through every step because there are lots of people who are like preaching the gospel of Linux out there. So I'm sure there's some really great guides. That being said, one of my bigger things that was stopping me for all these years has been like, well, I know it's not as compatible with so many things. So it's interesting to hear. I don't think I actually knew just how far it's come. I knew it's come a long way, but I didn't know it's come that far where like literally almost all games, I didn't know we were close to, I thought we were still closer to like few games can be played on Linux, and now we're way far away from that. And it sounds like most games, almost all games even, can be played on Linux, which is really cool to hear.
Is it Proton? I think is the
yes, that's the name.
okay. That's the layer I think that, and you can probably explain this better than I could, that allows software to like game software to run on Linux.
Gotcha.
So mainly you have a couple of like graphic layers or graphic libraries. Mainly DirectX that does not exist on
Uh-huh.
on Linux because it's a proprietary Microsoft graphics layer, and Proton is a compatibility layer between like the operating system and the application it's running, and it to simplify it, it translates all the calls to that library to something that is known on the Linux side.
Interesting.
And I'm watching the development of this library since I have a Steam Deck, and it become better and better and better. And I mean, performance-wise, I think unless you have like very specific hardware, something like a unreleased NVIDIA graphics card or something, then I have not seen a big downgrade in performance. So, for example, what I play a lot is the Kingdom Hearts games, and they run perfectly. They have the same FPS on Linux than they have
Interesting.
uh, on Windows.
Huh. That's
And
cool.
even like things like World of Warcraft, I have tried. It runs perfectly. As I said,
Oh
like
boy.
when you check out on Steam and it's a it's a Steam Deck verified game, then basically it's 99% it runs perfectly on Linux already.
Right, because the Steam Deck uses the Proton as
Yes.
its main thing, right? So that's kind of a Linux compatibility check for you. That's cool. Yeah, I appreciate you kind of
You
adding
can,
that perspective, because I think, at least I don't know about all of the listeners, but for me, that's kind of a little bit of news. I don't think I knew things were that caught up. I did know on a like some level, some layer of my brain knew that the Steam Deck was Linux based, and that was kind of moving things towards compatibility, but I didn't realize it had come so far. So that's cool. I'll probably someday do a Linux transition. I don't know, maybe Windows 11 will get me there eventually. I don't know. But anyway, so let's
That's
kind
a tangent
of,
right there waiting to happen. Let me not say anything.
yeah, go ahead.
I think even PewDiePie switched to Linux
Oh,
from
okay.
what I've heard.
Very
Yes.
publicly too.
That's funny. So moving towards kind of some of the performance pieces of Factorio, let's talk a little bit about the hardware side of things.
So when you look at Factorio, you might already realize it's not the most graphical, like taxing game. And if you compare it to Battlefield 6, for example,
Mm-hmm.
so usually your graphics card does not factor in at all into Factorio. It just has to be able to render these 60 sprite-based pictures, and that's very easy. So sprite-based graphics could be rendered 30 years ago on an SNES, for example, on in 60 FPS already. So I mean, the resolution is a little bit higher, but what really limits the Factorio when it comes to hardware is how your CPU and your RAM play together. And it's actually even not the CPU bottlenecking the game when you have a very large base, or you play Pi and you have a very large factory. It's you spend the most time is spent looking up stuff in the RAM. So you need to traverse the table of all of the entities that you have placed every single tick 16 times per second, and every time the table has to be traversed, it has to be looked up in the RAM, of course. And so the more memory bandwidth your RAM has, usually that one-to-one translates into more performance for Factorio.
Interesting. So it's actually the RAM speed more so than
Yes.
anything else. That makes
I
sense.
mean, like the very modern AMD processors, these X3D processors, they kind of cheat the system a little bit because they have insane amount of CPU cache. Cache is like something, it's the fastest memory that you can basically have. So if we put memory in kind of a hierarchy, you have RAM, like your hard drive is the very slow stuff. It doesn't matter if it's a hard drive or a SSD, it's considered very slow. And on top of that, you have RAM that's already very fast, but it can be faster. And the fastest thing is usually the CPU cache or the registers of the CPU. But the faster your memory is, usually it's more expensive, and it's harder to manufacture. So CPU cache, usually you have only a couple of megabytes. I think most processors ship with 32 megabytes of cache, and for example, in contrast, you have usually 16 or 23 gigabytes, 33, 32 gigabytes of RAM, and a couple of terabytes of like hard
Right.
drive storage. Um, and what these Ryzen chips do is they basically double or triple the cache but they lower the frequency of the CPU a little bit to make that possible. And then basically the whole application just lives in the cache, so it never has to access the RAM, and everything lives in the CPU cache. And that's why these, especially the 3DX, are so good for Factorio.
Interesting. Because it's like mega RAM. It's like I don't even need to
It's
talk to
10 mega
RAM.
RAM.
Yeah, it's
Short-term
these
memory
sorts
versus
of
long-term memory.
these sorts of considerations are things that I think about every time I build a computer. So you have like the faster the RAM speed is usually something most people don't think about. They just want their 64 gigabytes or 32 gigabytes or
Yes.
whatever it is, and they're just trying to find the cheapest thing. But it's actually worth it to go try to find ones that run at higher clock multipliers or whatever they're calling it these days.
Unless you're doing a lot of productivity stuff like rendering videos a lot and stuff like that, you don't need that much RAM. You need fast RAM usually, because you need to find a application that actually needs 32 gigabytes or 64 gigabytes of actual RAM, right? It's
Yeah,
better to have 32 to have more Chrome tabs open, right? But for performance reasons, usually the amount of RAM, unless if you meet the minimum requirement, it doesn't matter. It's like the
Right.
quality of the RAM that actually matters.
I do a lot of productivity stuff. So for me, I will chew up 64 gigabytes of RAM pretty much without trying. So
Okay.
that's my personal use case. This is
Yeah,
not
but
everybody's. I
most
do a lot of
people are
video
not
editing.
there. And I, as a gamer and even content creator, the only reason I went to 64 gigs of RAM was because when I was doing my Factorio thing for the Greg Tech New Horizons, I was hosting a local server and playing the game and running OBS and having Firefox or Chrome or whatever open to do the Twitch. And then I was also streaming to YouTube. And so between all of those things, I was starting to push into the 32 cap that I was at. And the other thing that's gotten me close was what's it called? Kerbal Space Program. Heavily modded Kerbal Space Program uses all the RAM.
Yes.
Yeah.
But apart from that, 32 has been enough for everything in my life so far as well. So yeah.
I opened Blender, DaVinci Resolve, and a couple of other things like Adobe Audition and maybe even Lightroom or something like that. And all of a sudden, RAM is gone.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just,
but all that being said, you wanted to talk a little bit about the memory allocation in Factorio. I see there.
Sure.
Tell us about that.
So there are, as I said, or as you said, a couple of things that you can do to improve your performance when you have a big base or playing Pi, without buying a new RAM, right? So everyone can go buy better RAM, right? And one of the things that I stumbled across was a thing that's called me malloc. It's as you said, a memory allocator. So for everyone who does not know what is a memory allocator, so when every time a program needs to save something in the RAM, it needs to reserve the memory. So it needs to tell the operating system, I own these 2 megabytes now, and don't give any other process access to these 2 megabytes, because I don't want these information to be overwritten or leaked or something. And Factorio is written in C or C++. And that means it uses a memory allocator that's called malloc. And malloc is a memory allocator that is it proved it exists for 30 years, I think, or as long as the C programming language exists, longer than I live, that's for sure. And it it has it's very portable, so it runs like when you have a C, when you want to port the C library, you need or the C library in general is available on everything, right?
Right.
We always see the news articles saying Doom runs now on X, Y, or Z. Any kind of pregnancy test device
Exactly the example I was about to say.
has run Doom yet, and that's because Doom is written in C, and or there is source code for Doom in C, and when you have the C library available for a embedded chip or anything, then you can just compile the code, and the memory allocator of Factorio obviously is the standard allocator that comes with the C library. But it's not the best memory allocator that's out there, because it has to cater to all of the things that the C library has to cater to. It needs to be portable. It needs to be very, very minimalistic. All these kind of things.
Right.
And they have and there exist drop-in replacements for malloc. The one thing I tried is malloc, that stands for, I think, Microsoft malloc, and basically you can just tell your game whenever you want to call the malloc function, use the malloc function instead, and that already can improve the performance, especially on modern hardware. I'm not 100% sure how Microsoft implemented this version of malloc. That's a little bit out of my scope, I would say. But for everyone to understand, it's just a different way to allocate the memory, a little bit more efficient, a little bit more with modern hardware in mind.
So how do
And
you actually enable that then?
I think on Windows there's a GitHub repository that's called Large Page Injector. From the name is Kein Niemand. I mean, I can put the link for it in.
Yeah, I can put that on the
In
show notes. I'm curious.
And you mentioned that it was a drop-in replacement. So 30 years ago is when I learned C++. So for me, I was using malloc then, but I don't. And I remember it having something to do with it tried to, if it could, make things sequential, etc. But I'm curious, if someone did a drop-in replacement of malloc, would that, like, the thing that I'm afraid of is what else could something else go wrong, I guess.
I mean, the worst thing that could happen is that Factorio crashes, right? Because you're not replacing the library. You just tell that one process, do not call the standard C library, use my DLL, for example. Like, it's just a
Mhm.
DLL, right?
Mhm.
And use that DLL that I provide. And in Windows, that is already implemented when a library exists in the same path as the exe file. Then it always uses the local version. It does not look up the path and try to find the library on the path. It uses the local one, and this is basically how this version works. It exposes a function called malloc, and when the C code calls for the malloc function, it uses that version instead.
I see. Override.
Yeah, it's an
Interesting.
override.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so
Okay.
just kind of looking, I've been looking at the Reddit thread. It looks like people can get 10, 20% Factorio boosts with this. I will say this is, the kind of thing where it's like it's a risk to use because you're trusting someone else's code and it could steal all your data kind of stuff, malicious, all the normal internet stuff if you're doing something outside the realm of normal when you are injecting DLLs. Yes, it's open
Sure.
source. You can read the code yourself, but unless you understand exactly how it's written, you can't confirm that it's not malicious yourself. So I do just want to throw that warning out there to any listeners who want to use this. We are not personally
Hashtag not
vetting the
legal advice.
safety of this software. If you download it and
Yeah.
use it and someone steals your identity, That's not on us.
I
It's
mean,
probably not going to happen, but it could.
if you're so scared, you can also go to the GitHub repository of Microsoft and get the DLL from there and do everything that, like you said, the program is open source, so you can replicate that and only use the trusted source, so to speak. But I have looked through the code already, and I think it just downloads something from another, or when it gets built, it pulls from another GitHub repository, the Microsoft one, but yeah, no warranties up from my side either. So
Sure,
because
sure.
this guy that created it can change it, obviously they can
Right,
push a new version that steals your data, right? But
right. But that being said, if you're really interested in kind of hyper optimizing your Factorio performance, that is a good option. And then there's also a large, huge page kind of that goes with that, right? There's something
yes,
there.
I mean, to go to the performance thing back really quick, is for me on my space age run at the end, I was hitting the UPS limit, and for me it was the difference between like 50 UPS, sometimes 45, and then rock solid 60 again.
Yeah.
So yes, 10 to 15% is what you can expect. It's
Fair.
not like buying a new gaming rig, but it can make the difference between being on the edge of low performance and having the 60 UPS again.
So if I might ask, usually when I have DLLs, I'm used to having them be referenced when I'm building the executable.
Yes.
And you mentioned something about this using a path to sort of inject it. It's anytime a reference goes to malloc, it instead goes to this. So you're essentially bolting on a DLL after build time, or do you have to build some executable from this DLL and then that's what Factorio uses? I'm not
No,
entirely
this
clear.
is. I mean, DLLs are dynamically linked libraries.
Mhm,
They don't have to be in the executable. They can be somewhere, right?
mhm.
And Windows has just a, how to say it, when a Windows executable looks for dynamically linked libraries, it has a sequence of where it looks for that library, and
That's variable.
the first location where it looks for the library is the same location as the executable is. So if you have usually your C library at C double point slash clib or C++ runtime, whatever, and there somewhere the malloc DLL is located, but you have malloc DLL inside the Factorio folder, then yeah, it uses that one instead.
Makes a lot more
So you
sense.
don't
Okay,
have to you don't have to tinker with like
that's
kind
clever.
of compiling a new executable or anything.
That's dangerous, but that's clever. As you
Yeah,
mentioned earlier, for the exact same reasons, we don't need to belabor them. But yep. Okay.
sure, but that's how Microsoft implemented it, not me.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. It's fine.
So then
But
so then it looks like there's also the large page addition to this, which is a separate
Yes.
piece. Um,
So so large pages are again tied to memory and RAM. So basically, every program that runs needs to reference address locations. And so, for example, what my professor tried to explain it always with an example, like we all live in one long street and everyone has an address, right? I live in XYZ Road number 14. So when I want to know where Eulenberg lives, then I look in my phone book and it says XYZ Road 27. And then I can go to that address and I get the value out, right? So I get the Eulenberg out. And like I said, the game has to look up a lot of data every single tick, 16 times per second. And that can be a lot of reference and dereferencing stuff. So if the memory is fragmented, that means that something is some tables or some entities are located at low address numbers. Some
Right. They're spread out.
entities they're very spread out. Yes, and what large pages are, they just make sure that before the memory is already allocated, it reserves, in that case, 1 gigabyte of RAM for Factorio, and it ensures that it's continuous memory. So address 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So and when your operating system tries to dereference these addresses, it's way much easier if it already knows that they are continuous. So it can just say, oh, the next table entry must be in the next address, and then in the next address, and then in the next address.
Right.
Other than to look up the table again, where's the next object, get that from the RAM, and then you basically save on that looking up the table whenever you want something from the RAM, because the program knows that the memory is continuous.
It pulls data in batches essentially. And
Yeah.
Yes.
gotcha.
Yeah, I'm looking.
Okay.
There's a Factorio forum post that talks about large/huge pages support on Windows, and people are talking about it. And it looks like that one, people are seeing like a 10-ish, 10 to 15% potentially performance boost on that one as well. So
I do have a question. Is there a trade-off in the sense of, like, one of the things that I always understood about memory is that if you have to, like, shift things, like shift a large block of stuff in memory, so if you like need to resize something in memory,
Yes.
that under this sort of system sounds like that could be more expensive.
Only if you have to shift the entire 1 gigabyte. Like, because it is 1 gigabyte continuous, the only downside is that you waste everything that you don't use. And normally, if you only allocate 500 megabytes, then the other 500 megabytes can be used by every program dynamically, right?
Mhm.
But when you use large pages, um, basically you pre-allocate 1 gigabyte or however you want, um, before you're actually consuming the memory.
I see. Okay.
So if you
interesting.
have a lot of RAM free, um,
Well, and most
then
people
there is
have
no
enough for
downside.
Factorio.
Yes.
Factorio doesn't use that much RAM compared to everything else these days. So yeah, interesting. Okay, that's cool to know. These are definitely some performance optimizations that power users, are gonna look into and be interested in. Let's keep rolling here. We were going to talk also a little bit about multi-threading, or the lack thereof, in Factorio.
Okay, so when I was dying the UPS dead, I always I googled like how can I improve my UPS, and there are a bazillion threads about what could be multi-threaded and how Factorio or Wube can improve. And then always there is one of the developers chiming in and explains very technically why it's not possible to multi-thread. For example, I don't find a good example now, but for example, the inserters, why they are, or the surfaces, that's a very good one. Why don't the surfaces exist on separate threads? And he comes up with an explanation that most people don't understand, and then basically case closed. And then the same
I know exactly
discussion
who you're
pops up.
talking about. I don't want to name them, but I know exactly who you're talking about.
Then 2 or 3 years later, you can see again, like someone suggests making the surfaces multi-threaded again, and then it goes on. So um, in the second year of university, I had the operating systems lecture, and my professor there had a very nice example um, to bring the concept of multi-threading or multitasking to us who were like unknowledged. And he said, like, imagine your Gringotts Bank from Harry Potter, right? Back in the day, you had one calculus goblin that's sitting in the hall, and he had a very big book with all of the accounts and how much money they own and things like that. And there was a second goblin, and the second goblin was a little bit stupid, so he could only carry out he could carry out any task, but you had to just say him like, go to the vault number 5 and pick up 10 golden coins and give it to the vault number 6. And then that was pre multi-threading or pre multitasking. And in the modern world of Gringotts Bank, they have so many customers that and so many of these accounting goblins and so many of the worker goblins that it didn't make much sense for them to actually store the money in the vaults. They just gathered all the money and they put it into one very, very big vault. And they decided to just have a small piece of paper inside the vault where they have the amount of money that that person owns. And because the worker goblins are still stupid, um, there's an issue now, because when two accountants, like, imagine I transfer money to your account, but at the same time you are transferring money to Krydax account, right? And when both of these tasks are executed at the same time, then the amount of money that ends up on your account can be wrong, because um, let's say we have the example with the transfer of money. You have $100 on your account, and you want to transfer $10 to Krydex. So the CPU or the bank or whoever is the imaginary thing that does the calculus calculates, okay, there's 100 on your account and I subtract 10, so I have to save on his bank account 90 now. So I send up a task to
Mm-hmm.
save the number 90 in your vault. But what if that task is interrupted by the task that what is by the task that someone gives you money, right?
Right. So it
So
could be saved as 110, but then the 90 comes in after that, and now I have 90
so
instead
and
of
yes,
100.
yes, you
Mm-hmm.
lose $10.
Yeah, that's
And
bad.
this is one of the reasons that's called a race condition. If two separate uh, threads fight over one resource, basically.
Right.
And due to the way Factorio is made, and especially the multiplayer, um, everyone who does a calculation has to come to the same conclusion at every single time. There is no variance there's no difference between the server and the clients.
Right.
Everyone does all calculations, and if some calculation differs, that's what's called a desync, then that person drops off of the server because they're no longer um they not they not have the same truth
Yeah, they're not
as
playing the same. They went to a quantum, like in the multiverse in all the movies these
yeah.
days. They split into a new multiverse, and therefore they get kicked out. Yeah, one thing that's another thing about Factorio's multiplayer. Desyncs have always been, a 95, maybe more percent of the bugs in multiplayer are desync issues because somehow the deterministicness of Factorio failed in some way. Probably because of networking stuff in most cases, but Factorio is a deterministic game so that each computer given the exact same input, is going to produce the exact same output for the next tick.
Every single time, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so that's
I mean, you can
why
easily try
people
that
can
at
separate.
home.
Uh-huh.
Can easily try that at home. Just put a assembler, put a couple of quality modules in, and then start one craft and do an autosave, and then reload that save. And you will always get either you will get a quality upgrade or you won't. It's not like in other games where you can like
Save scumming.
save scum some RNG with reloading. Factorio, that doesn't work unless you change the unless you change something in the bigger picture.
Right, you have to
That
progress
one
the
RNG roll,
RNG.
that one RNG roll will always be either quality or not.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it,
it's
so
so
it sounds like what you're
interesting.
saying is we should recode the entire engine in Rust. Okay, got it.
So
Sorry.
then which parts of because multi-threading is such a nightmare, obviously, and because Factorio has to be deterministic, I think it
Yes.
was, they decided at some point a long time ago that like the core of the game was not going to be multi-threaded. However, I know they have multi-threaded something. So which things do work multi-threading wise and therefore are going to almost be free to add to your base in UPS terms?
So basically, like you said, you have the main event loop. That's the main thread of the game. That will always be single threaded. It's unless you do Factorio 2, there's no way for them to detangle it basically. And
Right.
even if they could, it might not be as much of a performance gain. But the developers are very clever and they found kind of like certain modules of the game that you can take and they can run separately. And basically, all calculation is based on all the decisions are made on the result of the previous tick. So um, and the things that are indeed multi-threaded in Factorio are, it's not that little. Belts and pipes are fully multi-threaded, or the not the 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 movement of the items on the belts and the calculation of how much fluid is in the pipes and stuff like that, as well as the entire circuit network is on a different thread. That's why if a signal changes, it needs one tick to actually turn off the assembler, for example. Like
Mm-hmm.
the signal becomes true, but then it needs one more tick until the assembler turns off. This is because the the control behavior is calculated from the results of the previous tick.
Right.
But if all assemblers follow the calculus of the previous tick, then nothing changes for the user basically. It's just like theoretically your item moved one pixel further before it got picked up, but yeah, that doesn't matter. I think as well as I think all the heat, the heat, the pipes, the electric networks, they're all multi-threaded. But what's the best thing for UPS is that the control behavior, that's the decisions about like should a machine run or not, and the circuit network itself is not on the main thread. And we can abuse that knowledge to kind of move stuff out of the main thread into one of these some of the work can be shifted in one of these multi-threaded aspects of the game
Interesting.
to make the main thread more lightweight.
Quick
And
question with the heat, is that newer? Because I seem to remember people back when nuclear came out, having giant nuclear builds was often a UPS killer. And I thought that was, I know some of it was because the fluid network, the old one, was not as optimized. But I thought some of that was because actually the heat pipe caused, like tons and tons of heat pipe caused UPS issues too. Am I misremembering that? And you may not know because I know you just started when Space Age came out. So.
I mean, for the pipe networks, I only know that it was not the optimization itself. It was because every pipe was its own basically storage tank. You had a
Right.
lot
Sorry,
of
I mean
like
the heat. I mean
sloshing
the heat
around.
pipes.
That I don't know if that's something that was added on 2.0
Okay.
or
Yeah. I'm
before,
curious.
because I started playing the game with it being multi-threaded, so I don't know.
So
I'm curious if it
one
wasn't
other
at some.
question related to the multi-threading is it. So you've mentioned the main thread several times, and that's where the events happen. Which, for those who don't know, it's basically when stuff happens in the game, they're kind of captured as events, like you moved your character or whatever. And these events can trigger stuff happening in the game. This is usually with scripts or with things that just happen inside the game. But you've mentioned that all this stuff is on a different thread, and my question is there is there just one other thread that's running that's doing all of these things, or is it like it can take advantage of my Threadripper, my multi-core CPU? Or is
You
it just like
mean
there's one main thread and one sort of parallel thread, or is it one main thread and a whole bunch of other threads?
it's like the event loop is one thread, and then all these sub networks are independently from how I have understood it. The only bottleneck is, again, if one of the side threads itself uses more than 16 point, what is it, 3 ms of time, then it obviously slows the main thread by taking longer. But as long as the, for example, the pipes thread does not in itself use more than 16 ms, it's basically a no cost.
Okay. And
So
just
one
so
thing
everyone
that's
knows,
worth noting is that there's a Friday Facts on this topic, 151. If you guys are
yes.
curious to read a Friday Facts on it, um,
I'm glad you found the number of it. I was trying to remember desperately which one it was.
yeah, this is from like 0.14, so long, long, long before Space Age. But this is some initial chat about multi-threading, and then they talked more about it on Friday Facts 215, which again is still pre 1.0. I don't know if there's another one just for Space Age.
I think there was. I thought that was what I was thinking of.
There
There was
was
one where they
one
mentioned
pre-Space Age where I think they talk about how they failed to do the electric networks, and now
exactly.
they kind of found a way to do it.
Right.
Um, but I think they did a lot that was not covered by Friday Facts. So you need to pick your informations from the forums or
Sure, sure.
Yeah, that one boiled down to like what happens when I think it was one entity was on two different unconnected networks or something like that.
yeah, I
That
Mm-hmm.
was more of
remember the picture.
the use case where it broke.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got to keep rolling here. As much as I love this stuff is so interesting to me that I'm just like, it's funny because it's like for most of this, it's more just knowing is interesting. It's not like I can do too much with this exact information. Though what we're about to talk about will be a bit more of the practical stuff, which is what I want to get into. What are some actual optimizations that like players could use to make better use of, either what Factorio is really fast at or avoid more of what Factorio is slow at and is part of that main thread?
I mean, you have two strategies and to do stuff. One I tried to explain before. The first one is the very basic one. You can turn off certain things in the game that at some point in a playthrough do not have much impact anymore. Things like the biters or the pollution. These are just calculations that have to be done every single tick, right? And if you turn them off, you don't pay the price anymore. And when you're in the late game with everything legendary, then and your only goal is to build the 1 million science mega base, chances are high that the biters do not bother you that much anymore. So there's not much of a um, like trade-off in turning them on off. It's just like, yeah, I turn them off now, and then I don't get this notification that some of my wall is not damaged anymore, right?
Right.
But you have the big advantage of not paying the calculation price of these things. So I think pollution is a very big one. The biters in general, so all the logic that spawns the nests, that determines where they're going to gather and how the attack groups are formed and stuff like that, that all becomes like a void then.
Yeah, that's an easy one.
Um,
Biters off, pollution off.
and the other
Always an advocate for
strategy
that.
And the other strategy that you can do is, like I said, you can try to shift things that are currently on the main thread into one of these multi-threaded aspects of the game. Like for example, when a inserter should pick up some items and put it into your assemblers, right? You can wire the inserters to the belt and the inserter, and then use, for example, a ledge or something that says like, if only try to pick up things when there's less than 16 in the assembler. So your stack inserter will always then just grab a full stack from the belt and put it in. And for all the time that there's more than 16 inside of the assembler, the main game loop does not have to check, oh, is there now room in the assembler? Is there enough on the belt? Should I trigger the inserter now, right? When it's disabled by by yeah, the circuit network.
Yeah, so let's talk for a second. So the main, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the main killer of Factorio bases is mostly inserters taking from place A and putting it onto place B, whether that's taking from a belt into a machine or from a machine onto a belt. That's the biggest cost for most late game mega bases. Is that true?
Yes, that's like Galdoc said already. There's a event that where basically every inserter that cannot insert subscribes to a wait list, and every single tick waits for an event that is fired by the main loop to pick up items, and it has to check that every single tick. But if we can only have the inserter look for the event when by logic it can insert, then we only paying the price of listening to that event in that one tick where it actually swings, and not in the
Interesting.
95 ticks where it does not swing.
Right, but so sorry. I'm just trying to take half a step back, because what you're talking about, which is, it's kind of an advanced idea, which would be like clocking your inserters. Before that, I just kind of want to talk about what can players do to reduce their UPS, even at a more basic level, which would be like, what's costing your UPS. So that would be lots of inserters. So using fast inserters instead of multiple slow inserters would be like one
Yes.
easy way to save some UPS. Another one is direct insertion, right? Having a building insert directly into another building where possible means you save putting it onto the belt. Another one taking it off the belt, that helps a lot. And then you'll find a lot of people in late game bases, mega bases, will actually direct insert onto trains from buildings, and trains go back into buildings. No belts at all in between. So that way you don't have all the loading and unloading. One other note for modded players, which I know is a lot of our listeners, this isn't as big of a problem in vanilla because vanilla doesn't have warehouses, but huge inventories can be problematic for UPS. Like if you have warehouses that have 800 slots at every train station, the inserters actually, when I can't remember if it's picking up from or putting into or both. I think it's both. Yeah, they actually have to check every slot in that warehouse as part of their logic, no matter if you've disabled them or not. And so that can be a huge UPS draw. And they actually, like Pyanodons, reduced the size of their largest warehouses because this was killing so many players' late game bases, because players would have trains unload into these giant warehouses that had 2,000 slots each, and it was just murder on the UPS. Personally, I use a mod, I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, called merging chests. and then I kind of reduce the multiplier. So I can kind of make a chest of whatever size I need. That way I'm not having tons and tons of, 800 slot chests at my train drop-offs, but instead, if I only need 70 slots, I make a 70 slot, kind of rectangular warehouse, and that will also add up to UPS savings eventually as well.
Yeah, it's the inventory slots. They're a huge pain because, like you said, every single time the inserter tries to get an item, it has to check every single of these 2000 slots. Is there the item that I want to pick out? And if yes, how many? And how many is left then after I picked up, right? I think for insertion into a box, they already optimized it so the insertion algorithm does respect the limiting of the chest. So if you have 1000 slots on the box, but you limit it to one, that's for insertion purposes the same as inserting into a box that only has one real slot. But for extracting, you have to traverse all slots
Okay,
because
interesting.
an item could be in one of
Right.
the how is it called?
Blocked slots.
The blocked slots, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so yeah, that's really useful to know. And also, I want to point out loaders, another kind of modded thing. But loaders, people have done, at least the testing that I've seen. I did some research, but now this is a little outdated by a year or so. But testing with loaders seemed to show that things that use the Factorio loader profile, not things like mini loaders, by the way. Mini loaders were just inserters in a trench coat. That's its own kind of thing. But the regular loaders, which like AAI loaders, loaders modernized, there's other loaders out there. All of those use the vanilla
Vanilla
profile.
loaders.
Yeah. And those cost roughly on the order of 4-ish inserters in terms of UPS. So like people did some testing, and if you, I think it depended a little bit on the tests, and so that's why I'm saying 4-ish. But I remember looking at the numbers and thinking it's pretty safe to say that if you need 4 inserters or more for a given task in a modded save, you are better off switching to a loader at that point in terms of UPS. So that's just a rule of thumb from some testing that I saw.
So I did some testing on that topic as well, and I found out that there's a difference in the loader cost when you use an extracting loader and an inserting loader. There's a huge difference because basically, um, when you extract something, then the loader can extract multiple items at once, but it always puts in to the entity every single item by its own. And so for inserting, an inserter is better. For extracting, a loader is better in general. Like because the loader can take multiple items out of the inventory and puts it on the belt, where the inserter would have to grab and then put every single stack on the belt. And it's opposite for inserting into boxes.
Does this
So
hold true
Huh.
with? Are you including belt stacking in that? So like if items are stacked, let's say 4 tall, then the loader would be putting in sets of 4, right? So unless you had bulk inserters that had a bigger hand size than 4, you'd be better off with loaders still.
I think the engine loaders, they don't support stacking by default, so you need some kind of mod that adds that,
They
or
do.
the most
Like if you have
the
a
most
stacked belt that goes into a vanilla loader that goes into a chest, it does properly
yeah.
load at the full rate.
I'm talking about putting on the belt.
Oh, yes, correct. Sorry, I'm talking about inserting into a warehouse.
Yeah, then it
Um,
can theoretically put the entire stack of 4 items
okay.
into the thing.
Because like right now in my Planet on save, I don't even have bulk inserters yet. So a loader is going to be better than 4 regular inserters that can only move 1 item at a time. But what you're saying is if you have a bulk inserter that could maybe swing 10 items per swing, I'd be better off using a bulk inserter, UPS wise, than a loader, because the bulk inserter is only going to have 1 swing for every 10 items rather than 10
Yes,
individual insertions of items.
yes, exactly.
Got it.
But also what I figured is that I think the optimization of loaders, since they are integrated very well into the engine, um, the you should the amount of time you waste thinking about what's better now usually is not worth the. They're both are very similar
Okay.
in terms of cost per loader or per inserter. Um, so unless you really, really want to get like the last bit of everything out, um, just place whatever makes sense throughput wise, and chances are very high you already used the better of the both.
I do have one question. Have you tested splitters at all? How much do splitters factor into cost? Because if you're using a bunch of loaders, you need a bunch of splitters, which inserters wouldn't need because they would just take directly off the belt.
You mean like the early game Pinondron splitter versus actual splitters?
No, more just like what you like. If you've got a late game base, what percentage of the UPS is kind of being spent on splitter logic that you maybe could have saved if you didn't use as many splitters throughout your base? I'm just not sure where they factor in terms of the UPS overhead.
I have no exact number for this ready because the debug menu doesn't show. It just shows you how much MS the transport line cost.
Right.
But like we talked about earlier, the transport lines are on their own multi-threaded. So unless I overload and I build tens of thousands of splitters, um,
It's
I
probably
already
okay.
like I pay a cost for something separate.
Right.
And yeah,
Interesting.
unless my
Okay,
and
that makes
also
sense.
since the splitters can be controlled now, you can do way more advanced splitting of builds than you could previously.
Right. I forgot about that.
I just want to point out one thing for people who are listening to this and wondering how can I tell all of these numbers and such. Just um, in Factorio, if you press F4, it brings up a menu that allows you to turn on various debug options, and you can look at stuff. You're not going to break anything. It's just all of that does, it just shows you stuff or limits whatever it is. And what you can do with that is you can essentially arrange the F5 menu to, if you push F5, to show that stuff. So like you can say, show me the UPS, show me what the breakdown is. And then once you get out of that menu, you can press F5 and it'll show you the breakdown and to some extent where the time resources are going. And just for those of us who are new to this, we've been throwing around the number 16.6 or whatever milliseconds. That is 1/60th of a second. So that's one what's one tick for Factorio. So if you want, as we're asking these questions, if you're sitting at your own computer saying, I'd like to ask these questions too, and I'd be curious to see, those are some tools you can use to sort of essentially run personal experiments or do some thinking about it yourself. But I just
Yeah,
figured I
and
would say
if
that considering we're going back and forth on this, and I think that people may want to know.
yeah, no, I appreciate that, Galdoc. And like if you have basically 16.6 is your budget. That's how many milliseconds of
Yes.
time.
Right.
If your computer is spending more than that on each update, that's when you start lag. Well, lag is the wrong word. You start bogging down. You get less than 60 updates per second. So if you're using, let's say, 5 milliseconds of your budget on, a certain mod that you've downloaded, well, that mod is costing you a third of maximum UPS already, and that's problematic, right? And so it also breaks down each mod separately. Um, There is one, it pulls all the scripts into something called script update. So script update can be from all your mods. So you got to kind of do a little bit of research there if script update is killing your UPS. But yeah, it's really useful, and I've used it a bunch of times to kind of see where my UPS is going. And you can also see by using that method how close you are to bogging down. If you're at, say, 8 milliseconds for your update, well, that means if you're about halfway to, lag. Now, because of some of these optimized pieces, you might still have more than, you might be able to double your base and you'd still be under 16 because of some of these things being more efficient. And there's also a baseline cost that the game has on things. So, building twice as big doesn't always cost twice as much in terms of resources for your computer.
Yes, because a lot of things have an upfront cost, because it doesn't matter if you have one entity doing whatever or 10,000.
Right.
That initial cost is very high. And once you paid that initial cost, you don't have to pay the cost again for the 10,000 other entities that are of the same type. And that's why, in some cases, doubling does not mean that your that your update time doubles.
Yeah, I think solar panels fall into that category. You can put down a bunch of solar panels, and it's not going to really affect your UPS at all.
Solar panels are just O1, right? Like a big O notation.
Yes.
Like the solar panels cost the same amount whether you have one or a million.
What the game does is
it's group
it's
at
just
one point, and that's it.
It just says, okay, one solar panel will give me 500 kilowatts, for example, and then it treats all solar panels on the same surface as like one big entity.
Yeah.
That gives you a multiple of the amount of entities worth of energy.
All right, this has been great. We gotta keep rolling though. So I do want to have you come back to the inserter clocking thing, because we've now kind of just gone into depth on like why inserters particularly are such a big deal for UPS death in the late game megabase. So what is inserter clocking, and how do you use that and abuse it?
So there are again different strategies on how to drag the cost of the inserters into the control behavior and circuit network thread. And the most established one is most likely traditional clocking. So you figure out that your inserters need 1 or 16 plates per second to run, and and that means that if you have a hand size of 16, the inserter has to swing once per second, given that it has enough of material to pick up, obviously. So I can create a circuit. You just need one, I think you need one decider for a clock, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And how to do that you can find on YouTube. There are multiple tutorials on how to build a clock. You can just say, okay, the inserter is just for 2 or 3 ticks per second active. So you make a condition of the clock, and you say only if that condition is true, the inserter is enabled. But then you have to figure out for every single assembler and beacon constellation how much do the inserters actually need to work of 1 second, and it can be quite cumbersome to do that for basically every single ingredient, every single step in the factory. But it is the most it's the most established one, and it's the most effective one. So if you actually go the extra mile and do that for everything, then you get the most out of it.
And I presume if you had a global clock, you would want, like, let's say, okay, sorry, I'm trying to catch up here. So if an inserter, because it takes some amount of time to actually do the swing of the pickup and drop off. Once you've enabled the inserter for 1 tick, if you then disable it again, is it going to continue picking up items off the belt, or will it just, I'm assuming it's pick up from a belt.
If the inserter is enabled for 2 or 3 ticks, I'm not 100% sure if it was 2 or 3, but then it does the entire swing. it then stops at the next idle position.
If
When
it's
it can idle
picking up
again,
from
it
the
will.
belt, though, let's say it's a stack inserter that can pick up 16 items from the belt. What if it's only picked up 4 items by the time that third tick is done? Then will it just swing those 4 because you then disable it
No.
on the next tick?
No, then it's disabled inside the pickup whatever frame. And when it gets enabled again in the next second, it would try to pick
Okay.
up the remaining items because the stack inserter is coded that it will only swing when it's full.
So it's more for ones that are not picking up from a belt, that the 2 or 3 ticks, because then if it's coming from a chest, it'll grab all 16 in one tick or whatever.
Yes.
Okay. And
But
ideally,
if you have a back pressure on the belt, so if you have a full belt, right, and the entire production line never consumes the full 240 items, then basically you can assume that all inserters can always pick up.
Okay, so a green belt with four height
Stacks.
stacked is gonna be able to provide that 16 items within 2 or 3 ticks. Got it. So then, are you then putting all of your like sections of inserters on a different part of the clock, so they're costing their resources on different timings, but one global clock for your whole base?
Actually, I put all inserters of one sub-factory on one clock, and then basically the between sub-factories it can differ, but usually I want all inserters of, let's say, the iron plate smelting, I want to grab at the same time.
Gotcha.
Because if I have when I have back pressure, I remove all the items at the same time, and then the belt has a whole second to ensure
Reset.
that the back pressure is given again, right? And then everyone swings again.
Yeah, so it kind of has a second for it to scrunch back up again so that the next wave can all have stuff at their grabby points, to use all the technical
Yes,
terms.
nice term, grabby points. I
Yeah,
have
the
to
grabby
remember
point.
that.
Yeah. So what I was getting at though is by doing that, you're kind of relying on randomness when you set up the clocks for all of your inserters in different parts of your base to not be overlapping, right?
But my aim with this is not to save UPS on the like control behavior stuff. I already pulled. It doesn't matter even if all 2000 inserters get triggered at the same tick. I achieved that. I for the other 59 ticks, I have no cost on the main loop because
Right.
that cost of triggering the inserters and calculating the circuits, they are a different thread, and I already pulled the cost of doing that away from the main thread.
Totally. I was just
So
trying to get at though, if you did trigger them all, like your entire base, all planets, all surfaces on the same tick, wouldn't that create a miniature lag spike on that tick?
if all inserters would cause logic to be more than 16 ms, then yes.
Right, and that's kind
I
of
mean,
what I
there's
was getting at, where you'd want, like what you said, if you set up each subfactory with a different clock, when that clock is built, chances are very low that it's going to trigger on the exact same tick as another one, and that way your different subfactories aren't all overlapping on the same tick. My only point was when I said you rely on randomness was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, because 1 in 60 is a very small chance, and if you have 50 different subfactories, they're not all going to land on the same tick. It's roughly impossible, but it could happen.
But you're
It's like
technically
a
true
resonance cascade. It's
that
not going to happen.
I mean, you're right. It can happen because when you have backup, right? So when the production stops and then everything starts again, right? Chances are high that they all need something on the same tick.
But if they're clocks, then the only time that would matter is if all the clocks reset at the same time.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right.
And you mentioned simple observer. How's that a different method than the clocking method?
That's the method that I use the most time actually, because I find that like doing all the calculations for every single step in the factory is a little bit cumbersome. And it also, compared to what I'm explaining now, is only we're then optimizing for the secondary thread. So if we already reached 16 ms of control behavior, then we can think of optimizing our circuit logic, right? So what simple observer means is we just observe the factory, and if the factory has not enough plates, that triggers the inserter logic. Like we say, read ingredients and in crafting, and then on the inserter we make iron plates smaller than 30, and unless there's less than 30 plates in the smelter or what, the inserter is plain disabled.
So this is what you were talking about earlier, where you just turn off inserters when they're not needed, and by doing that throughout the
Yes,
whole base, that alone is almost as good as clocking, or at least approaching that, maybe.
it's very close actually. Like I would say that for everyone who's not trying to have the biggest base in existence is totally fine with the observer version. I
This
mean,
is so
we're
interesting.
talking about having so much control behavior logic that we need to optimize control behavior logic now in order for the control behavior thread to not throttle us.
Which
And
is
then
more the
the
traditional
traditional
clocking one, you
clocking.
mean?
Yes, so if we have so many observers that we are bottlenecked by control behavior, then we have to go the extra mile of thinking about the traditional clock that everything runs at a specific tick.
So the
Or
traditional clock is cheaper on the circuit line of things, but is often not needed, is what you're saying.
yes, because I can have 200 inserters triggered off the same clock,
Right, off the
and not
same
not
condition.
one not one evaluator, because with the observer there has to be one evaluation done per inserter and assembler pair, right? Because every assembler is connected to the inserters directly,
Right.
and the decision is made out off of that.
But isn't the inserter deciding anyway if it's connected to the clock? It's just saying if the clock symbol is less than 2, then I'm enabled, versus if iron plate is less than 30. So how's that different? Is it because it has to read the assembler, reading all the different assemblers?
Yes, because it's just you then have one list of things that get enabled, and only one thing where uh, the state is created. That's the clock, and then the whole list of stuff that gets enabled when the tick is greater than the clock
Oh,
is
so
greater
when the
than 2.
decision making between all the inserters is the exact same condition, it lumps them together and it's more efficient?
No, because the state of the assembler can be different.
No, sorry. I mean in the clock version. Like if I had 200 assemblers lined up all on one green wire where it said if clock symbol is less than 2 as the condition, you're saying that being one list of inserters that gets enabled on one condition is more efficient?
I am not. I think it doesn't get squashed into like one virtual inserter. But what happens is I don't have to evaluate. I already know that the clock for this tick is greater than 2, so I don't have to look up the. I only have to do half of the comparison, right? So is this
Interesting.
an entity that is triggered? Yes or no? And I don't have to do the part where I say, is my value correct
You
for
only
this
have to
condition
ask
to
what
be
the clock
triggered?
symbol is once, and
Yes,
then the rest,
basically.
there is still the 200 checks of less than 2, but the clock symbol was only needed to find out once. Whereas if it's each
Yes.
assembler inserter pair, it has to find out how many iron plates are there in this one, and does that meet air
Sh-
condition? Gotcha. Okay.
And
One,
then for basically the last strategy is we can combine this into the lead follower principle. That's something a very clever guy came up with. His name's Aberknasty, if I pronounce that right. You can find like his YouTube stuff. He does a lot of work, and he professionalized that observer idea into being as close as perfect to or as similar to traditional clocking as it can get. And yeah, I think he has even the record of like the biggest base currently. I think it's 4.5 million SPM.
Jeez.
It's insane.
So what's the lead follower method? What's the different? What did he do?
So basically what he does is he has the observer on the very first machine in the line. So he checks the smelter or the furnace, for example, and then all the furnaces that come after, they do not read from their own furnace. They read off of the condition: is the first inserter currently active or not? And what happens is it needs a couple of seconds, but then everything syncs up, and then basically you synchronize the state of every single furnace or every single assembler in the line, and then you basically need only one. You can have them all on the same condition. Um,
And as long as
and
you have
you're
room
not
for all the outputs, then that'll work because they all have the same recipe time and the same space and everything.
Yeah, you can obviously only connect inserters together they all need to have the same amount of beacons. They all need to be in the same production line,
Right.
physical
That's
production
cool.
line, right?
One thing that's so interesting to me about all this is when I have been doing my Pyanodons run, I was, I've been doing a lot of using the reed hole belt condition to make sushi belts. And I've been thinking every time I connect up inserters to like a Pyanodons building, and it's like, oh, only insert into the building if, we have less than we want of the output item on the belt or whatever. I thought I was actually making my base cost more UPS by doing that. Like I actually thought, and not like a lot. I wasn't freaking out. I mean, maybe you can ask Twitch chat. They probably said I was freaking out, but I wasn't too much freaking out about killing my base. But I thought I was actually making my base slightly more UPS inefficient by adding in these inserter conditions into the buildings. But it sounds like I've actually made my base more efficient by having these inserters turned off most of the time.
It comes a little bit like you need to evaluate certain things on a per case thing, because there are so many different insertion and exertion kind of scenarios, like from the belt to the belt, from the belt to the assembler, from the corner of the belt, and things like that, and they all work a slight bit different. But in general, you can say that if you use a controlled inserter of any kind, you're improving your performance over having it just stand there. Because
Interesting.
then the game logic takes does the evaluation for you, and that's not always the most efficient one. And also, it has to run it has to be active all the time, because it has to be active when it needs the stuff in the inserter, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you know ahead of time what the condition is,
Yeah.
then you can only pay, like I said, the price of the main event loop when you actually want to pay it.
Cool.
And the disabled inserter costs you no UPS. I think you can have 1 million disabled inserters and you won't have any noticeable update time.
It sounds like something I'm going to have to experiment with, because so far I've been listening and been dreading making a mega base now. Like, it sounds, this is absolutely fascinating, but I feel like I would want to understand it, and kind of this, coming back to where we were at the beginning of the episode, internalize it a bit more before I could actually execute it. But I think it's interesting. I'm reminded of when I did Gleba and ended up getting stuck on the fact that I couldn't quite get the circuit conditions to work out with, I was trying to put stuff into assembling machines and pull stuff out. But and this sounds like sort of that being that to the next level, which is fascinating. And I have a feeling that understanding this will help me understand several other things. But
I mean, for everyone who's interested and has a little bit of tickle to build a mega base, I can just recommend the channel of A Bug Nasty, right? He does for like all of the stuff, and he has he kind of even he goes the extra mile of basically scientifically proving the impact of every single circuit constellation that's out there. He's doing a lot of work. He even has a tool, I think it's called Belt. It helps him to do all the the benchmark stuff, and he publishes all of the things. So, and he goes into detail into why things are the way they are, and how how the follower lead principle has advantages over the traditional clocking and things like that. So if you want to really go in detail, then look up his videos,
I feel like I'm
and
going to have to
you
because
won't be a
yeah, that's
professional
great.
mega baser in no time.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's so cool. I mean,
Excellent.
it's so interesting to me. Like Factorio is one game, but it's really so many more than one game. So many more games than one game, because you've got your whole speedrunner community, and they are kind of doing their own thing. They're all in their little community. They have competitions. There's so many intricate things about speedrunning that you need to learn, skills you need to have. And then there's the people who play biter battles, the multiplayer thing, and that's its own world. And then there's the people who just love building giant stuff in space age, but not mega basing to this kind of level. And then there's the people that are into this, like A Buck Nasty, apparently, where it's just like, how can I push the limits of the engine further? So it's literally like the maximum number of effective SPM with a given set of hardware that you can possibly achieve. And that's a whole different challenge. And then there's all the modded stuff. I love Factorio. There's so much to it.
This is kind of playing the meta game, as it were, to sort of get around, I don't want to say engine limitations, but or shortcomings, but basically quirks. Try to get
it's hardware
as much out of it as you can.
metagaming. And he even pushes the meta game forward, right? He looks at already established things and questions like, and then he challenges he often challenges his community to like submit new designs, and then he's going to test them on stream, and
I love it.
publishes like what was the best. And that's also what you said, the different facets of Factorio is even if you get bored of your mega base, or if you get bored of, or you get burned out of Pi, there's a totally different game that you can play within Factorio. Basically,
it's called Doom.
It's I think I have seen
Can Factorio run Doom? Yes.
I think I have seen a Game Boy emulator built in.
Exactly.
What people won't do with Turing complete systems.
Yes.
Oh man. Well, we got to start wrapping up here. This has been awesome having you on here. Are there any other kind of final thoughts that you have, Eulenberg?
I mean, I want to give a little bit of a shout out to the Wooden Universe community, because I think this is these are people that create awesome overhaul like mods that are a little bit overlooked, I think. Especially the Voidcraft mod is something that I love to play, but you can do a spotlight on that if you want at a different time. But yeah, so the Wooden Universe people, thank you for creating awesome mods. Thank you.
Are you saying Void Universe?
So their Discord server is called Wooden Universe, and they're like, I think, two mod creators.
Oh, cool.
Wooden Universe.
Got it.
And one of the mods is called Voidcraft. It's a mod where you conjure instead of mining. Like it's a little bit magic themed.
Okay.
And they also have some kind of like sky block thing going on.
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm looking at pictures right now. That looks neat. I'll have to check that out at some point.
It's kind of like you get stuff for free, but in as a downside, you have to deal with the junk that comes with it.
I love it.
That's kind of like the trade-off. But I have just lately made a full run-through of their entire mod suite, and they even built a mega base
Nice.
with it. So yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Awesome.
That sounds great.
Cool. Well, with that, we'll wrap up episode 43. As always, if you'd like to support the cast, head over to patreon.com/Krydax. Galdoc, as always, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
And Eulenberg, thank you so much for your really particular insights. Like, it was really cool hearing kind of what you had to say about all these different categories. I learned so much.
No, I have to thank you for inviting me.
And now I know about me Malik, so that's great. I'm actually I want to go look this up after we're done here, because that I am curious.
Yeah, I think this episode's going to nerd snipe a lot of people for one reason or another. There's a lot of nerd snipe shots fired in this episode, I think.
Don't cross any streets while listening to this. Just don't. XKCD says it's a bad idea.
So to wrap it up, I think that for Windows, if you want to use the performance stuff, it's very easy with that GitHub repository, but no warranties. If you want to use Linux and the memalloc and large pages, it's a little bit more involved. It's still possible and easy to set up, but people can just hit me up, and I'm glad to help.
Yeah, and I was gonna hit on that. You, the best way for people to get in touch with you would be on Discord, I assume.
Yes, if you just did the handle in the description or something. I mean, I'm always available on Discord usually.
And people can find you, I assume, in the main Factorio Discord as well as Krydania.
Yes. You mean the Factorio? I thought it was the Factorio modded, but I think the Discord, it's just called Factorio, right?
Yeah. It's just straight up Factorio. It's official Wooba Factorio. All right, sweet. Well, in that case, we will wrap up the episode. As always, we stream the cast on the first and third Monday of the month. If that needs to move or get canceled, I will let you all know on Discord. So if all goes well, we'll see you guys again on November 17th. And if you have any questions, ideas for topics, or guests, head over to the Krydania Discord and let me know there. I'll put a link in the description. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time. Always remember, the factory must grow.